By the 1830s, European settlers first started to arrive in what would later become Jefferson County. Times were tough. In the summer of 1837, preacher Amos Lemon, his wife, and their 5 children arrived too late to plant a crop. By midwinter, they had run out of food and were eating the bark of slippery elm trees to stay alive. Neighbor Sarah Lamberth heard of their plight and decided she needed to help the starving family. That night, she spoke with her husband Thomas.
But what can we do? We barely have enough, and travel in this weather is nearly impossible.
But we have enough for the 2 of us until spring. And the food that I would eat can be fed to those little children until some other provisions can be arranged for to stay their hunger. I can, and I will, eat potatoes.
All right, fine. When do you think I should go?
I hoped you would feel the same way about this as I did. Your bags are packed. You get going in the morning.
From that day on, Sarah Lamberth ate only potatoes so that her neighbors could eat bread and survive the winter. The Lemons family survived that winter, and their children lived on to bless the name of their benefactress, Sarah Lamberth.
There is a story in that land. What's happened to it, the floods, the droughts, the fires, the Indians, the pioneers, what they went through to break this land out of sod. They walked behind a plow. They spaded it with a shovel. There was no federal programs. There was no roads. There was no veterinarians nearby. There was no seed consultants. There was no fertilizer dealerships. It was you and Mother Nature. Get it on.
The first settlers who came to Iowa came out here for farming, for the land.
There's a lot of diversity in Jefferson County. There is the good flat land, very flat, and then there's a lot of land that's on the slopes and the hillsides. The flat land developed under a prairie for the most part. On the hillsides, it was mostly under forested conditions. And that was a good place to start because the soil under a forest is very loose from the leaf litter, keeping it mulched, easy to till compared to the prairie, which is very difficult to till with all the deep roots and so on.
Just where you would think, like along the Skunk River and down along the lower stretches of Cedar Creek, there were more oak groves and savanna. The trees were spread out enough that sunlight could get in and you could have both trees and prairie together.
So the people, when they came here, there was a lot of resources to establish homes. So that's where they went. They went to the creeks. Cedar Creek was an extraordinary stream. And that's where you find some of the earliest cabins.
This is originally, according to my abstract, 1838. A guy by the name of Condor bought it from the federal government for $1 an acre, 40 acres. This was the site where the first log cabin in Jefferson County was. So this is some of the oldest settled area, cultivated, I guess you could call it, in Jefferson County.
It wasn't long they started to cultivate the most rough, difficult places. And when the plow was introduced and they could get up on the prairie, that really changed things.
The root system in a prairie is extremely dense. Those roots grew anywhere from 3 to 12 feet down in the ground, into and sometimes beyond the subsoil.
To cut through the tough prairie roots, the early farmers in Jefferson County plowed with oxen, which were much stronger than horses. But their work was slow, as they had to stop and unclog the soil from their iron plows. What they needed was a self-cleaning plow.
John Deere was a blacksmith, and John Deere's plow, being steel rather than just iron, would scour itself, and that made a tremendous difference, an advance in how much a single farmer could plow during a day and the amount of work it took to get through the field.
My ancestors came into Iowa in the 1830s when they opened up for settlers. About 1860 is when they settled here where I was born. We lived with my great-grandmother who came across in the covered wagon. So I lived with a pioneer.
The original Switzer homestead, 1843, that was homesteaded by my great-great-grandfather. He had gone to a training program started by Thomas Jefferson, the president, in the Masonic Brotherhood to learn to be a surveyor. As a surveyor, he found this quarter section that was not squatted on, and then borrowed the money from his father-in-law and established the homestead.
My great-great-grandparents, Joseph and Mary Hinshaw Hadley, bought land from the government in 1848, just over the county line. They built their cabin there. And we have an original land patent deed for 40 acres, which Joseph bought with a bushel basket of gold that he brought back from North Carolina. And it's signed by James Polk, President James Polk.
I'm a proud family farmer. Family on both sides of my parents have been in this. I'm 5th generation. My nephew Chris is 6th generation. And so we go back to the 1st generation to come from Sweden to Jefferson County.
When Iowa is being settled in the late 1830s to the 1850s, you see county fair starting up very early, and that is started by an agricultural society. And those are the people who want to improve things in farming. They want to have better livestock. They want to have better equipment. And they want the community to come together and discuss those things at a fair. So it starts out as a county fair, but then Fairfield launches the first state fair in the state of Iowa.
Well, there's a story that a lot of people doesn't know about, and I'm going to tell you. One of the most interesting things that happened at the first state fair here in Fairfield was the female horsemanship class. There was 10 people that turned out for it, and 2 of them happened to be from Fairfield, so we was represented. And the grand prize was a gold watch that was worth $100, and at the end, the girl from Lee County won it. Well, the crowd did not like that whatsoever. The girl that they liked was a 13 or 14-year-old girl from Iowa City. So they decided to do something about it. And they passed the hat and collected $165 for her. That was a big controversy at the first state fair.